This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it in me.
Stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common
But my
sense.
homework is
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in for Steve the 20th of November. Thanks for joining us on the program. And thanks to Steve for inviting me on to keep you company here on this great morning, host the Common Sense Radio. I'm glad he doesn't talk to my wife. My wife doesn't think I have a lot of common sense. So I don't know if I would have been the right person to host Common Sense Radio for you today, but I'm glad they don't talk. I think I have common sense. My wife doesn't think that I do, though. I got what is Steve doing today anyway? Well, Steve's out in the woods, and I was just taking a look at Facebook. I wasn't creepy crawly, like following him around on Facebook or anything. It just kind of popped up on my feed. He's up north somewhere. He's somewhere where gas is $1.88 a gallon. He had to take a picture of that and post it on Facebook. Along with that, his comment was, "God bless fracking." Thanks for that, Steve. And that comes after the group that wants to ban fracking tried to get signatures, try and put that on the ballot. That came a little bit short. So that isn't going to happen next year. But thanks to Steve for being a little timely on this. Got a couple other issues going on here around the state that really kind of capturing what's going on here in Lansing while the legislators are on their hunting and Thanksgiving break. One of them has to do with the Syrian refugee situation. Before we get to that issue, I wanted to tee this up a little bit. Here in Kansas, there was a commissioner in a county in Kansas who was criticized for putting on a slide presentation at a local government meeting a showing of the convicted criminals in the area with the name Mohammed. The Kansas chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations is urging Kansas political and religious leaders to repudiate the views expressed by Commissioner Carl Peterjohn. Two of the men in the slideshows were 9/11 attacker Mohammed Atta and executed Washington, D.C. area sniper John Allen Muhammad. That's one way to do it. And over in Utah, this is another one I thought was kind of interesting. A school in Utah is apologizing for a classroom assignment in which students were asked to create a propaganda poster for a group such as Islamic State to understand the goals and methods of the terror groups. The assignment at Salem Junior High School in Utah was canceled after several parents complained. A spokeswoman for the Nebo School District says the assignment was given Wednesday by a first-year teacher to about 60 ninth graders in a world civics class and was not approved by the school. Teacher may have wanted to run that one up the flagpole before trying that one out. But here in Michigan, one of the big question is a change in position, I guess you would call it, from Governor Rick Snyder. Originally, Governor Snyder was one of the leaders in the country as far as Republican governors in exploring the prospect of bringing refugees to Michigan. After the terror attacks in Paris on Friday, he came out and said that we should now pause any type of discussion on bringing Syrian refugees into the state until there is a thorough review at the federal level to make sure that the way that these refugees are screened would indeed be proper. Now, the question then becomes, well, then where is the lieutenant governor on this? Lieutenant Governor Brian Kelly historically has served the role as the conservative voice in Snyder's inner circle, and he has so far not really talked about where his views were on Snyder's original decision, try and bring them in, and what his views were on Snyder pushing the pause button. Now, myself and another reporter, Zach Gorchow from Gongwer, had a chance to catch up with Brian Kelly yesterday in an event, and we went ahead and asked them those questions. We wanted to bring you the audio of that. Did the governor do the right thing as far as pushing the pause button on the Syrian refugees?
Yes, the governor made a very reasonable request, some would say logical request, in the face of risk and the things that we're seeing happen around the world, to ask the federal government to pause and to provide additional information regarding how the screening process works, whether there are opportunities for improvement, and it just seems like such a modest and a reasonable request to make, particularly considering the type of security risks that our world faces these days.
Now, were you okay with what the governor said originally as far as opening the borders up to the immigrants in the first place? You got hit on by one member of Congress at least on this issue.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what hit that was, so I'd have to wait to respond if you want to.
If you can just hit pause here a second, Alex, let me go ahead and fill you in on that. That was Candace Miller. She said on her Facebook comment on the situation, throughout his tenure, I think Governor Snyder has done a great job for Michigan, but I was very distressed about this particular initiative that he and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley were pursuing. Now, why did she mention Brian Calley's name? Well, it just so happens that his name is being considered in the 2018 GOP gubernatorial sweepstakes, as is her name. How about that? Well, let's go ahead and press play again, Alex, and hear what he says about that.
Over the weekend, after the governor made his announcement, I had a lot of concerns about this program from Governor Snyder and Lieutenant Governor Calley. It certainly struck me as unusual that she threw your name out. Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's not that I don't trust you, but I would rather go and look at it myself.
But so he's claiming he's never seen that Candace Miller Facebook post, which. I don't know. You can take that for what it is. Okay, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead.
To the question, though, you were okay with the initial decision from the governor?
I don't believe that the governor has a direct part in how many refugees come over here. His approach of supporting legal immigration and filling skills gaps and the communities in Detroit that could benefit from immigration, I think is really the approach that he's always had, and that frankly I don't think that this really changes that type of an approach, even though he is rightfully asking for some assurances that the security or that the screening is adequate to protect our people.
Did you make your thoughts known before the announcement was made, what if you thought something should happen, or did he make his announcement and then you heard about it?
You know, our internal discussions among our team and that lead up to the governor's decision, they're not things that I discuss publicly.
All right, we're going to go ahead.
The governor makes it.
Go ahead and stop that. So he's not going to go ahead and directly answer yes or no. He's kind of put in a tough position here because on one hand, Calley is trying to bolster maybe his conservative credentials, which he does have, but then he can't be seen necessarily as a bad soldier within the Snyder administration either. He's been a very good soldier when it comes to standing by Snyder and his administration. So when asked personally about what he felt about the original decision about bringing in Syrian refugees, you notice he never really said, yeah, I support it. No, I didn't support it. He was kind of put in a tough situation there. It's a little too early to distance yourself from your governor if you're Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley. You still got about 3 years left working with this guy. Like I said, he's been a real good partner with him, so he's kind of put in a tough position there. You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter. We'll be back after this.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling today, the 20th of November. Thanks for joining us this morning. We've been talking about the Syrian refugee situation again. Today, I wanted to get a kind of a counter opinion to this whole issue. Joining us on the other end of the line is the VP of Immigration Policy for thinkprogress.org. That's Tom Jawetz. Thanks for joining us on the program today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I should just clarify with the Center for American Progress, which is our C3 side.
Okay, thank you very much for that correction. Let's go ahead and get your opinion on the political response we're seeing on Capitol Hill and across the country about, at the very least, pushing the pause button on accepting Syrian refugees into the United States. Is that a bad move to reevaluate our procedures on this?
I think it's a matter of good government generally to always look at the procedures that you have in place for any system and decide whether there are improvements that could be made. So I think, generally speaking, government should always be looking for ways to improve its processes, and private enterprise, everybody should be doing that. I think we should be doing that in our own lives. I think the question here, though, is whether or not that requires a pause in the current system. And the great concern that we have with that is, well, let's just take a step back. What in our current system changed from the time of the Paris attack till the present time? Prior to the attack, we had the most robust and extensive set of background and security checks that exist for any person seeking entry to the United States at all. That was true before the Paris attacks. That is true now. And so I think that's something that should guide a lot of our discussion going forward.
And so can you kind of describe, and you do this in a piece that you wrote in a column here, about these refugees. Give us your opinion on what we're talking about here. We're not necessarily talking about terrorists, right?
I mean, we're talking quite definitionally about not terrorists. We're talking about people who are fleeing persecution, fleeing for their lives, fleeing torture on account of their membership in a social group or political opinion. These are people we're talking about here are people who have been identified by the United Nations Refugee Agency as being refugees. They've been screened and vetted by the United Nations. They then, through a process that takes, for the average refugee, 18 to 24 months. For Syrian refugees, it's closer to 2.5 years. A thorough, multi-layered series of background checks that involve both biometric data, fingerprints, photographs, and a great amount of biographic data, including interviews not just with them face-to-face, but also interviews with people that they are familiar with, people on the ground, and elsewhere. So it's a very, very multi-layered and secure process.
We're talking with Tom Jawetz. He is the Vice President of Immigration Policy at the Center for American Progress. Now, you could argue, though, that during this process, it's possible for a terrorist to slip into this network, isn't it? That they could use this opportunity to come into the United States and do us harm.
I mean, I think what I would look at is, I think Governor Inslee from Washington said yesterday, I think, there's risk in getting out of bed in the morning. The level of security checks that are done through this program are unparalleled in the American immigration system. There's nothing like it. There's far less scrutiny in every other area that you're looking at, essentially. And so one question you might ask is, if a person who wanted to do harm to the United States wanted to come here, would they choose the refugee program, which would necessarily entail a delay of 2.5 years for a Syrian refugee coming to the country, would require that the United Nations, first of all, recognize them as being a refugee, that the United Nations would choose to refer them to the United States. Only 1% of the world's refugees get referred for resettlement anywhere. And then the United States, after going through all these checks, would decide, yes, we in fact do think you qualify and think there's no problem, and then you should come to the United States. It doesn't really stand to reason that this is the point of attack. So the idea that we are focused on the refugee program, which are the very people who are fleeing the kinds of violence and terror that we saw on the streets of Paris, to take out our anxieties on, is really problematic.
So you're saying... So what you're saying is that it would be easier for a Syrian refugee to come into the United States through another mean, like crossing the desert in Mexico or sneaking into a car going through the border there at the Blue Water Bridge. Some other immediate way, it would be easier for them to sneak in and bust through our security than by going through a process that, just by its definition, takes years to go through.
I mean, there are great challenges, there are great costs, and there are great challenges to all the things you're describing. There's also a legal immigration system as well, right, where folks can come on tourist visas or through student visas. And, of course, those are the ways in which, frankly, the 9/11 attackers ultimately ended up exploiting our system. So it is very important that we have a system that puts security checks in place, that has appropriate levels of border security. I mean, all of that is required in order to keep America safe, and that is, of course, going to be a top priority. But I think, in days after Paris attacks, when I think fear is completely understandable, that is exactly the point of the terrorist attacks themselves, we should evaluate our system, but we should do so in a way that I think is guided by our minds and not purely by that fear.
Do you think that Republicans in particular have been exploiting this issue for political purposes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I want to turn. I would like to not turn this into a partisan issue if possible.
Okay, but it's you got to admit it's been hard because it seems like it has turned into that.
It does feel in many ways like it has turned into that, and I think that's really unfortunate. I'm in Washington, D.C., and the mayor of Roanoke, Virginia, when he was justifying why he thought we had to start tracking Muslim refugees in his city and to bar refugees from coming to the city, cited approvingly the Japanese internment during World War II, which really feels like we're through the looking glass. The idea that you'd look back at a period of time that I think is universally understood as being one of the low points in American freedom, and say, maybe we've got something to learn from that. I think the response has been, I think, irresponsible. And one point, just a flag, I think it's not just irresponsible in terms of America's values and the right things to do generally, but I think it's irresponsible from a security perspective as well. And the Center for American Progress has done some good work on this, as well as many others. We are currently facing the largest refugee crisis that the world has seen since World War II. And the strain being placed on our partners in Europe, the strain being placed on countries in the region. 1/4 of Lebanon right now is made up of refugees who are flowing into that country. Turkey has more than 2 million refugees.
We've got to let you go right there, I'm afraid. Thank you very much. Tom Jawetz from the American Progress.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in today. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Join us on the other end of the line. I'm really happy to have Attorney General Bill Schuette join us. Good morning, Attorney General. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning, Kyle. How do you like this radio gig?
Oh, it's kind of fun, isn't it? I mean, it makes me get up in the morning. I can't say that it's improving my eating habits, though. It's my second straight day of donuts in the morning.
Well, you need granola, pal, but I've heard that now that you're doing this radio thing, that how can you be the play-by-play announcer for both the Michigan State game against Ohio State and the Michigan versus Penn State? How do you do it, Kyle? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know what, though? I wouldn't do the Michigan-Penn State game. My allegiances are strictly with the green and white, and I would go with that one. But you know what, though, Attorney General, I'm not feeling very good about that game against Ohio State. I think 12 points is very generous of a spread for Michigan State. I'm thinking it's going to be more like 2 touchdowns, maybe 3.
No, I think Michigan State wins. Great teams find a way to win, and Michigan State does that. And D'Antonio is, he's a heck of a guy and a great friend. And both D'Antonio and Harbaugh have this intensity that is reflected in their teams, and that's what good leaders do.
I actually read about that in your new book here, and I wanted to quickly bring this up. Big Lessons from a Small Town. This is your new book that I've actually been reading to my 3-year-old Finnegan to try and get him to sleep at night. I was reading him Moby Dick, but that was putting me to sleep. So I said, well, I'm going to read something that will actually keep my interest and hopefully put you to sleep. So I started reading this. I got him saying on duty Bill Schuette now and getting him excited when I start reading it to him. And you will be happy to know he has not fallen asleep to this particular book. So I don't know if that means he's interested or he just likes my voice, one or the other.
Well, he probably loves your voice, and thanks for talking about Big Lessons from a Small Town, my book. And when your son's old enough, have him read these Chip Hilton sports stories that are great stories, and written by a guy named Claire B. This is a little-known fact, like Cliffy at the Cheers bar. Written by a guy named Claire B. And Tom Izzo, the great Michigan State basketball coach, received the Claire B. Award. So anyway, when your son's old enough to read, have him read these Chip Hilton books. It's a great about character and leadership and adversity, and I think your son will like that too.
Well, I appreciate that tip. I'll go ahead and check that out. What? Something I was really struck by reading this book is how often you came back to that loss to Carl Levin back in the U.S. Senate, and then also the change that developed from that and your first run for Congress. You mentioned that. It really seems like that was a big turning point in your life.
Well, it was next to the loss of my dad, who died when I was 6. That the loss of the U.S. Senate race, when maybe I had a little bit more ambition, or maybe impatient, and all of that. That loss had a big impact on how I approached life and things. But if I had to do it over again, you never can do those things over again, right? Had I not run for the U.S. Senate, and this is why it was significant, I never would have reconnected with my wife, Cynthia, who was, from my hometown of Midland. And, so things work out the right way. But how you respond to adversity is one of these life lessons I talk about in big lessons from a small town. And I look back to football coaches who say, when you throw an interception, get up, dust yourself off, have a short memory, and throw touchdowns. And so that's one of the lessons that I talk about in the book. And some of these people, you'll know they're presidents, CEOs of corporations, whether it's Rich DeVos from Grand Rapids or others across the state. And they'll be my football coaches that only if you're from my hometown of Midland will you know those names. But I'm glad you're enjoying it, Kyle.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you very much for putting it out here. I would just want to turn the page here to more of a current event topic here. We just had somebody on who was talking about the refugee situation that we're seeing here in the Middle East and with the Syrians, and that terrorists who would want to come to the United States to do us harm could find easier ways to get into the United States than by going through this refugee process, which by his estimation takes at least a couple years to get through, and there's a lot of barriers to get through it. For that reason, and I asked them if people who are pushing or calling for the pause on the refugee situation are playing politics. He didn't want to go there. But why do you think that it's important for us to reevaluate bringing Syrian refugees into this country if there may be easier ways for terrorists to get into this country?
Well, look, Kyle, I think it works this way. First, America needs to be a hopeful place. A hopeful immigration policy and a legal immigration policy. And the concerns after the terrorist attack in Paris, and we've seen this global terrorism network. It's not a JV team, as President Obama incorrectly described. This is a real threat. We've seen what happened. We have an aggressive security system out there that we just need to make sure nothing slips through the cracks, and we need to vet the immigration process and the protocols from top to bottom, scrub it clean, and be careful. And whether whether it's one way or two ways or three ways that we need to secure our border, we have that responsibility to our nation. So I think this is mature. I think it's reasoned. I think it's thoughtful that we halt this immigration process in the middle of this spike in terrorist activity, look at it thoroughly, and make sure that there's accountability on all levels. I think that's what Congress is trying to do, and I think, frankly, that's what the American public want and deserve.
Back in September, Governor Snyder revealed that he was exploring the idea of bringing an unknown number of refugees from the Middle East to Michigan. He saw that as maybe an economic opportunity to bring this community to an area where we do have a lot of Middle Eastern folks. Was Governor Snyder, looking back at it, was that the right decision from Governor Snyder to kind of open the doors to these refugees at that time?
Well, I'm not going to go back and second guess. It's always easy to look back and see what somebody should or shouldn't have done.
But would you have done it? Would you have done it?
We have a very good governor. The point is, I'm very proud. I think our state's very proud of the ethnic diversity we have in our communities across the state of different races and creeds and certainly colors and ethnic origin. So I'm proud of that. The point is now, particularly with this the Paris attack, that it really did change everything. And so now what we're doing, and in my opinion, that we should push the halt button and review all the process and procedures in terms of immigration policy to make sure that we have accountability and we're doing everything we can. And I think that's just smart. I think it's reasoned.
But Governor Bill Schuette would not have been out there in the forefront exploring the idea of bringing refugees from Syria into Michigan, correct? I mean, I'm safe saying that.
So I'm Attorney General at this point, trying to do my job in every way I know how with a great team, and on duty, so to speak, 24/7, 365. That's my responsibilities now, and what happens in the future, we'll have to get on your radio show other times.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the program, Attorney General Bill Schuette. You going to be watching Michigan State or U of M this weekend?
I am going to be watching that state game, but I'm hoping that we have both a go green and a go blue, and I may flip the channels back and forth as well. We got two great teams. Dan Toney and I are great friends. He did that nice forward in my book, and so I'll be watching with great interest.
Thank you very much. Bill Schuette, the Attorney General for the state of Michigan. We'll be back after this.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
You're listening to the Steve Gruber Show. I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in today, the 20th of November. Thanks for joining us on the program today. It's a cold one out there this morning, 31 degrees in Lansing to start off the day. We're supposed to get a high of 43 at some point. I don't know when that's going to be. Probably will not be during the Silver Bells celebration downtown Lansing. I'm going to guess. It's always bitter cold down there. Grand Rapids about the same, low of 31, high of 41. Cadillac looking at snow today, 36 high, 23 degrees low. Charlevoix, same kind of thing. 38 degrees is the high, 29 is the low, and snow expected for that area. And then up in the UP, if you're listening to us up in Marquette, 34 degrees is the high, 24 degrees is the low. When the cold temperatures come, there's no better time really than to hit the movies, and to talk to us about that, Ron Van Timmeren. Thanks for joining us on the show today, sir.
Hey, Kyle, how's it going?
Oh, it's great. I stepped outside today. I thought, man, I want to go back inside. I don't want to go out in this. For those people who are going to go inside the movie theater this weekend, what do you think the hot movies are for them to look and enjoy?
Well, we got several good choices, but certainly the biggest one of the bunch this weekend is going to be Mockingjay Part 2. Obviously, it's the end of the trilogy of books that so far have grossed over $2.3 billion in worldwide box office. So they're hoping for a big finish on this, and they got some good reviews. They got the biggest of the big screens, IMAX screens all across America, D-Box, those seats that move with the action on the screen. And above everything else, Kyle, they got Jennifer Lawrence back. She's really worth the price of admission.
No, and this is the part 2 then of the book Mockingjay, and of course Mockingjay was a single book. Does this movie get hurt at all because they cut this thing in half?
Well, part 1 did. A movie without an ending is always a tough sell, but this one, obviously, they wrap it all up, and it follows the book pretty well, right down to the end. I forgot, after reading the books, years ago, what the twist at the end is, so some people might be surprised, but they did follow the book, and they got besides Jennifer Lawrence, all the cast you know and love is back. Josh Hutcherson, Liam Hemsworth, Julianne Moore. We got Woody Harrelson. Even that Philip Seymour Hoffman sighting. This is really the last time you'll see him in some new footage on the big screen.
Do you think this is going to knock off Spectre?
Yeah, no doubt. Spectre's been a great film 2 weeks in a row, almost $150 million in the bank for them. Mockingjay is tracking to do $120, maybe $130 million this weekend, so clearly that will be number one. But there are a couple other interesting movies. Comedy, The Night Before, R-rated comedy, very R-rated comedy, I must say. If you know Seth Rogen and his brand of humor, you might not be surprised. But think Pineapple Express, This Is the End, maybe a little Bad Santa, since it's a Christmas-themed movie. Him and Anthony Mackie and Joseph Gordon-Levitt co-star in that. And then Julia Roberts has a new movie, Secret in Their Eyes, which is a murder mystery. And then Spotlight, Kyle, that's that movie based on the true story of the Boston Globe reporters who uncovered the cover-up in the Catholic Church. That's getting terrific reviews.
And if you're a reporter like me, this is something that you might want to check out. It's a true story on how the Boston Globe uncovered the massive scandal of child molestation and cover-up within the local Catholic archdiocese, shaking the entire Catholic Church to its core.
Absolutely. Good cast, too. Rachel McAdams, Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, Stanley Tucci, Billy Crudup. Michael Keaton might find himself in the Best Picture 2 years in a row, the way the critics are raving about Spotlight. So if you like movies like All the President's Men, I know I'm going back a ways yet, but this is one of the best of that genre.
Going back to a movie that you talked about just a second ago, The Secret in Their Eyes. That's got Julia Roberts in a role that I've never seen her in. She's kind of playing the creepy person in that one, isn't she?
Well, I can't quite figure it out. That's the secret, I guess.
I guess so. She doesn't look very good in those promos.
She's a detective, I take from the footage and what I've read, and she's investigating a murder. They find the body, and it's her daughter, right? They arrest the suspect and then let him go on a technicality, and it turns into this cat and mouse thing for years. But I don't know who's the good guy and the bad guy here.
Yeah, and you can't really tell by watching the preview, and I guess that's why they do the previews, keep you guessing on this, but she certainly doesn't look dolled up, that's for sure.
Oh, what a terrible haircut. My goodness,
God,
Julia. Lose the bangs, girl.
Yeah, right. No, that's a tough one, but it looks like a great movie, something they may want to check out. But I think this Mockingjay one is going to be the one the wife wants to take me to first. She's read all the books, and there's just got to be a ton of buzz out there on this one. I was looking at kind of the cartoon ones that are out there. The Peanuts movie is number 2 still. That looks like that's been doing really well at the box office.
Very well, yeah. Audiences love that movie. It's pushing $100 million already in its second week of release, and so that's going to be strong right through the holiday. Even though a little competition next week, Wednesday, the new movies open up for the holidays early next week, and Pixar and Disney release The Good Dinosaur. So there's going to be 2 really good family movies for the holiday season.
And then also coming up on Wednesday, I see we got Victor Frankenstein, Creed, Brooklyn, Trumbo. Do you know anything about any of these other ones?
Well, yeah, Creed is obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but remember Apollo Creed from the Rocky movies?
Oh, that's the one about him.
Yeah, it's his son this time, all right?
Okay.
Michael B. Jordan plays Apollo Creed's son, and so we're going to get the Rocky boxing movie formula there. Victor Frankenstein, they're saying, is a bit of a prequel to the Frankenstein we've always read as the character. And then Brooklyn, a period piece love story that's getting rave reviews, and Trumbo, again, a period piece about the blacklist days in Hollywood.
Going back to Creed, they couldn't dust off Sylvester Stallone, get him to do another one, huh?
Well, he's in this movie.
Oh, is he really? Okay, he's not boxing, is he?
He's in the corner, man.
Oh boy! But he's not going to box. He's not going to put on the gloves, is he?
I hope not.
I guess we got to watch
this prime by far.
Well, I guess we'll have to watch that movie when it comes out next Wednesday to find out for sure. Ron Van Timmeren, thanks for joining us.
See you the movies.
I'm Kyle Malin, editor of the MERS newsletter, filling in for Steve Gruber this morning. We'll be back after this.